Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, September the 24th, 2025, and this is our series, Life Lessons of the Bible. And today we're going to look very briefly at Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japeth. They are Noah's sons. They and their wives and their parents are going to be the only human survivors of the great flood. So in the context of looking at them, we know that the Bible describes Noah as being righteous. And because Noah is righteous, he and his family are going to be saved. And we know that after they come out of the ark, after the flood, that Noah is going to plant a vineyard. And he's going to get drunk. And he's going to be laying in the tent, totally naked. And the tent flap obviously isn't closed. He's kind of exposed. And that one of his sons, Ham, sees his father like that and mocks his father and tells his other two brothers about it. And that they respond correctly by seeking to take care of their father in his inebriated state. They take a cloak and they walk backwards in the tent, not to see him, not to make fun of him, not to mock his condition, but just to cover him up. But they're not described themselves as being necessarily righteous or unrighteous either way. We know that the Shem line is going to be the line that Abram, later to be called Abraham, is going to come from. We know that because of Ham's actions in mocking his father and being disrespectful over the getting drunk in the tent incident, that a curse is placed not on Ham himself, but on his descendant Canaan. And so we know from tracing the trees of humanity that certain people groups come from Ham's descendants, certain people come from Japheth's, and certain people come from Shem's. But I want us to think more about the three young men themselves. That okay, their father has gotten this calling from God. He's gotten the instructions to build this ark, and they're helping their father build the ark. And Noah is preaching to the known world at the time without any converts. And that when the ark is completed, God sends the animals, the pairs of animals, so that Noah and his sons don't have to go out on some big safari. They all go into the ark, the animals go into the ark, and they're waiting there for 7 days inside the ark, waiting for God to act. And the door is open. At no point in the Genesis story does it say that Noah tells his sons, time's up, people have run out of chances, let's close up the door. No, it says very specifically that God closed the door to the ark, and that then rain for the first time began to fall on the earth. And of course we know from the biblical record in Genesis 6 through chapter 10, where it's now dealing with the table of nations, that the rain begins to fall and the fountains of the deep open up, and it becomes very obvious very, very fast that this ark is now floating, that a flood has come, and that everybody that they knew has died. We're not told about Shem, Ham, and Japheth's spiritual conditions themselves as far as how righteous they are. We know that they're saved because of their association, for sure, with their father Noah. We know that God is going to use Shem, Ham, and Japheth and their wives to repopulate the earth with people afterwards. Everybody in all of human race is descended not only from Adam and Eve, but from Mr. and Mrs. Noah and their sons, Shem, Ham, and Japeth, and their unnamed wives. We can all trace our ancestry back to at least those few seminal people. What would it have been like for them to work alongside their father all these years, hearing him proclaim something that God was going to do and warning of judgment, that rain is going to come and destroy the earth, and people don't even know what rain is? but yet they kept working with their father. When it was time to go into the ark, they and their wives went in. When they came out of the ark, they and their wives started having children. They disobeyed God's instruction. When they came out of the ark, they're told, scatter out among the earth and replenish it. And instead, they all marched in one small holy huddle off to the plains of Shinar, what you and I would know as modern-day Iraq, the area of Babylon, where their descendants, in very short order, are going to decide that we're all going to stay together and we're going to build this tower to make a name for ourselves that reaches to the heavens. Whether or not Shem, Ham, and Japeth personally would have been upset by their grandkids and their great-grandkids not listening and learning from the lessons that Noah and Shem, Ham, and Japeth and their wives could tell them about how God judges the earth and how God shows mercy, that people chose to go their own way. We know that they survived the flood experience, that they had to make choices. Sometimes they made good choices, sometimes not so good choices. Sometimes their choices were in obedience to God's word, sometimes not in obedience. But that God had spared them and allowed humanity to continue to live on through them. Shem, Ham, and Japheth are life lessons for us in terms of being close to the people of God, hearing the things of God, and sometimes responding positively, but other times not necessarily responding in the right way. We know that God chose the line of Shem, not to say that anything's wrong with Japheth, or that Ham particularly is having anything wrong other than the one thing we know he did wrong. And even then, Ham wasn't cursed. It was his descendant who was cursed. But God had to choose one line from which Messiah was going to come. They knew what had happened to the world that they used to know. They knew when they came out of the ark that the planet had been restored, but that there had been lots of death and destruction, but that life had to go on. And sometimes they were obedient, and sometimes they were less than fully obedient, but they knew God was still at work. And that's how we need to approach our lives. When good things happen to us, to not only celebrate the good things, but to know that God's at work, but also to know that when things don't go well, when a tragedy occurs, when you've experienced great loss, when you're experiencing uncertainty, that God is still in control then as well, and to trust God for our futures. Thanks for watching.